promise. But I thought I would give you some insight because when I show you the content on leadership, I want you to understand some context because in the early part of your career, I think it's super important that you, guard yourself from everything that tells you your instincts are wrong. And what I mean by that is, believe it or not, I started this, you can do math, of course, 25 years ago, in 1997. I didn't really start my consulting firm on purpose. So this is one thing I want you to really hear before I get into the content, right? When I started, I just knew I was super unhappy with the job I had. And so a lot of people start their own business or go get another job because we're dissatisfied with something. Maybe you hate your boss, maybe you're not making enough money, whatever it is, right? We have a lot of things. And that can be good motivation alongside hopefully with good ideas and a lot of drive. And when you're young, I think you're probably all having some version of this. The other people around you, they're going to be afraid. They're going to be afraid of you leaving your job potentially and starting something on your own, or maybe taking a bigger job or a scarier thing. And so it's important that you spend time, planning and listening to yourself and thinking through your choices. And I'm sharing that with you because I think for about 5 years, not kidding, 5 years, when I left my job, I think I was 29, 30. And a lot of people thought it was a bad idea. And by the way, when you do what I did, which was start a consulting and coaching firm at a young age, you don't have as much experience as a lot of people who you might be working with. And so I had to be very sure of myself. I had to do a lot of homework and find some mentors to help me so that in that first 5 years, I could start to really master some ideas. And so I'm saying that to you because I don't know where you are in your journey, but I want you to have the encouragement to listen to your heart, to know what you want, and then do the work to really have a solid idea about what you want. My consulting firm wouldn't be alive today, 25 years later, if that first 5 years I wouldn't have spent time really getting power behind the tools and the ideas, some of which I'm going to show you right now. And so I hope you take that to heart, because the first 5 years in your career, when you get serious, is super important. I'm hoping you're all in that time, because now what I'm going to give you is a lot of information. But I'm going to pause a little bit as we go so that when I give you kind of something really meaty, is what I call it. If you have specific questions, and if I see them in the chat or Ignatius sees them, we can pause if we need to, because I have a lot. Okay, so Ignatius, can you give me control of the PowerPoint, or do you want to control the PowerPoint? You or Rachel, tell me.
Rachel did the control.
Great.
Okay, sure. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Or you can just give me the control and I can do it, whatever you want.
Okay.
Zoom
is allowed. It's allowed now.
Allowed, great. Isn't it so awesome that we can do this? I'm in Los Angeles. You guys are far away, but it feels like we're in the same room together, and I love that. Okay, so like I said, everybody get ready. I'm going to blow your mind a little bit for a Sunday evening. You're going to be like, wow, what is she doing? So today I'm going to talk about leadership practices, but you know, Ignatius gave me an amazing intro, and I know you saw my bio if you looked on social. We do work with a lot of big companies, but I also work with a lot of small companies and startups. I like the balance of that. And so what I'm going to bring you today is leadership ideas that work in both big companies, small businesses. Whatever you do, you can find something here that works for you. It's not just about big companies. So I'm going to talk to you about three things. I'm going to talk to you about the shadow of leadership. And then I'm going to talk to you about kind of what happens inside a business every day that drives behavior. And that behavior becomes the performance of the business and the results of the business and the culture of the business. And this is not rocket science. It's not too heavy, but it is something that you need to learn because it's what's really going on. And you can read a lot of books and take a lot of classes, and there's a lot of philosophies out there. I'm not giving you a philosophy. I'm actually giving you the real, like, what's actually happening practically underneath. So when you read leadership books, oftentimes that's someone's opinion on how to do this system better. But I'm going to give you the basics of it. So let's get into it. So first, we're going to talk about the shadow of leadership. And I don't mean shadow in a bad way. So if you think about the word shadow, sometimes people in movies and stuff, they go, oh, the shadow, it means something bad. And that is not in this context. The shadow here is really just what's the leader casting on the business every day, because you as a leader, it doesn't matter if you're the CEO or the president, or if you're just a manager or a supervisor of people, you are affecting the people around you. And I'm sure if any of you have ever had a job, you know what I'm talking about. The leadership has an effect. I call it the shadow. And here's what's in that shadow, right? So just be real practical. A leader is a person. That's you or other leaders, right? And that leader comes to work every day and has values, like what they believe, what they live in their life, what they think is important. So whether they know how to say that out loud or whether they make a fancy, nice printed paper or not, they have that in their heart and they have that in their mind. And you bring that to work every day. And then it comes out in your behavior. And behavior for us is what a person does every day. It's what I do and how I do it, right? I say things or I don't say something. I take action or I don't take action. That's really our behavior. And behavior has lots of pieces to it, right? And so in that, I think someone's annotating and I love that. Yeah, so let's think about this a little bit more as you go on, right? So the leader comes to work every day and they're doing and saying things and they're thinking and then they're taking action or not taking action. And then I want you to learn that what we do over and over again, practices is what it's called, right? What I call a practice is what the leader is doing like every day in the same way. So I'll give you an example. If you think about how people respond to communication, so you can email someone and, you know, some people answer you right away and some people don't. That's their values and their behavior coming out in a practice, because a part of the way we communicate with each other is through calls, text, email, etc., right? All the ways we communicate, direct messaging. And the way you do that every day habitually becomes a practice. Now, in a business, we also have what we call procedures. And those are the things we agree on that we need to do in a certain way so that business works, right? So procedures might be, if you work in a food restaurant, that we have certain procedures so that the customers experience, well, what they paid for, right? They get what they want. And so if you think about that, what's happening is leaders are driving by what they say and do, the kinds of practices and procedures that are in the business. And that becomes what we call culture, right? Culture is the way the business works. The culture of the business is when you take all the leaders and the people with practices and procedures, creating now a culture of the business. So if we want our business to have a certain feeling, we want our customers to have a certain experience, we want our employees to have a certain experience, that's the culture of our place. And all of that's being driven by leaders. And here's what I really want you to remember, whether you're a leader or you have a boss and they're the leader, the reason we call it the shadow of the leadership is because most of the time the people in the business get paid and they believe I have to please my boss. I have to do what the leaders want me to do because that's how business works. Our leaders, our managers are there to help people do the work so that the customers get the product or experience something. And so how the leader behaves and thinks becomes the shadow of our culture and our practices. And by the way, I'm saying this because I hope what you're thinking about is that can be good. Sometimes it can be bad, right? It just depends on the leader and how they're executing and what's happening at any moment, right? But it doesn't matter. I just want you to understand it just exists. And our leaders together, so let's say you're in a place where it has a few leaders, right? Or a team of leaders, which is what happens in big companies. They together cast a shadow based on their collective practices. Oh, for some reason, my dog is having a bad dream and she decided to talk to us. Okay, so I want you to really think about this. This is something I hope for your whole career you understand. Business outcomes are a direct result of leadership practices. I think that my dog is just Shasti. She's going to be a part of it. She's really saying I'm telling you the truth. So our business practices our business outcomes are the direct result of leadership practices. So I never want you to forget this. And if you become a coach or a consultant like me, you can say it to every leader you know. Whatever business outcomes you're getting, let me show you this. So this is a system. Leadership practices, what our leaders do habitually every day, is driving your culture, which is driving your relationships. I'm going to stop. I'm going to go more into this in a minute. I want to show it to you. Gets business outcomes. So if you're thinking to me, oh my gosh, what if we're not getting the business outcomes we want? What if our business is not making money? What if our business is having problems? Well, guess what? They're having the problems because something's wrong in our relationships. Something's wrong in our culture. Something's wrong in the leadership practices. And because this is a connected system, they all relate to each other. So let me just explain this again. Our leaders have practices, what we do every day as leaders and how we make decisions. I don't know. She's a being. Hopefully she'll stop and it won't disrupt us too much. We have a culture, and I want to spend a little time talking about relationships. Our relationships are our interactions. So I really want you to learn this. There are interactions with all of our stakeholders, and our stakeholders are our customers, right? So think about that. So every business has a stakeholder group of customers. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist. You have members. If you're just a small restaurant or a store, you have customers who come and buy things. That's one stakeholder group, and you have a relationship with them. And most businesses, by the way, understand, if they stay in business, their relationship with that stakeholder group. And they spend a lot of time and energy ensuring that that relationship is protected, right? So we are protecting our relationship with our customers because we want them to have a loyal relationship with us. We want them to come back and buy things. We want them to stay with us for a long period of time. And most businesses pay attention to that relationship. And of course, the other relationship businesses spend a lot of time and money on is that of their employees. So the two main relationships are our customers and our employees. So the reason I'm telling you this, how this system works, is if you think about it, our leaders set practices and policy, and then every day are helping people live in the culture of the business, follow the policy and procedure, by delivering our services through our relationships. That's our employees interacting with our customers, right? And so our leaders are driving that through practice and policy, creating a culture that impacts every relationship. And that relationship of our employees and our customers, well, it gets us business outcomes. So either people come back to our store and they continue to buy from us, or they have a bad experience. Maybe they get a bad product, whatever, but something's happening in that interaction. And then we get business outcomes. So if you learn this system early, then you can start to think about it in a purposeful way. You can start to think about, again, as a leader, if you're not getting the business outcomes that you want, you can look in any one of these parts of your business and you can adjust it. And you can start to think about, wait a minute, if I'm not getting the outcomes I want, if my customers aren't coming back, then what part of our relationships with our customers, whether that's a product or services, is working or not working? And you can start to make change. I call it tweaking, where you start to adjust something in those relationships, the culture and the practices. Now, I want to say something that is maybe obvious, maybe it's not obvious to you. Sometimes part of our relationship problem is that we have the wrong people. And so leaders say to me all the time, that means I have to fire the people. And I say, well, maybe, but you should probably go all the way back to your leadership practices and think about, how do we think about this when we hire people? How do we think about the customer relationship? And let's go all the way back before we assume the problem is just one person. Let's make sure we think about this whole system and that we do it in a way that is what I call strategic thinking. You might think about it that way too, instead of making a reaction to something, but you always are thinking about this system in its full interaction with itself is what I call it, because this system is going to work all the time, whether you do it intentionally or not. That's why I was saying you can read lots of books on leadership, by the way. Great. If it works for you, that's wonderful. But it's only one piece to this system or this puzzle. If you can do great things in leadership, but if you don't do it consistently, for instance, and make sure you pull it all the way through to culture and relationships, it might not get you new outcomes. So you have to think about the application of how you think about leadership and how you behave and what you want and how it's going to impact the culture of your business, how it's going to impact the relationships, and then are we going to get the results that we want? So let me pause there and just see, Ignatius, or do we have any questions yet just about this before I add more? Because it's just going to get, I'm going to add layers.
Okay, so they are gathering their thoughts with regards to the questions. So I think we can go ahead. Once the questions come, I'll drop them here. Hope that is fine.
Great. Okay, so everybody get ready because this is just going to get even more exciting. So, okay, so now I have a lot to add for you. So remember, I'm going to show you something, and most of this exists in small businesses and in big businesses, and I want you all to know it so you can see it on purpose from now on. Like it's never going to be erased from your brain what I'm going to show you. Okay, so leadership practices, here we are. So I started there before and I told you the whole system of business outcomes is driven by leadership practices. And so now I want to talk to you about performance, right? So the performance in business outcomes has to do with not only your results, which is how much money did we make, how many products did we sell, how many customers come to our website and visit the website. You know, those are results. But the performance is the whole experience. So like I was saying, someone can come to your store and buy one thing, but they're experiencing the whole performance of your team and your place and the products. So whether you have a website or an Instagram or a physical space, It's the same to your customer. And I know you are all customers, you buy things. So I want you to think about that, right? Like this is a holistic way to think about the experience that your customer has of you and your business. And if you have employees or other people on the team, it has pieces to it, right? It's not just one thing. And they will keep coming back if what they get is good, right? They get what they want. They get value from what they want. So that's what's called results and the performance of the people, and it matters. So I want to work from left to right so you start to understand, and I'm giving you a lot of information because I want you to think about the fact that this all usually exists, whether we know it exists or not, and whether we do it intentionally or not. So we have leadership practices at the top, same as I was saying before. It's how the leaders think. It's what the leader wants to happen. It's whether the leader is in a good mood that day or not, right? It's our leadership practices. Does the leader answer their direct messages or do they never call you back? It's all of those things, leadership practices. And then what most businesses have, and I'm going to use some words here and you can kind of put it in your own experience. We have ways that we measure performance. So big companies do it with computer programs where they have data and reports. Small businesses tend to have performance measures that are really, easy. Like sometimes like a food restaurant or a store, they have it, their performance measure is at the end of the day, they count the money that they made that day. That's a performance measure. For those of you who are in the digital world and you have an Instagram account or you have a website or you do online business, you have performance measures. You have probably insights like how many people visited my account, how many people are liking my things, how many people are commenting. Those are all performance measures. Every business has a way to measure the performance. And usually it has something to do with money. And then the bigger you are, you add performance measures because the bigger a company scales, the more it has to measure. And it's important that you as a leader, as you grow as a leader, wherever you are in your career, that you start to understand that, like I said, this exists, whether we measure it on purpose or not, whether we have the right tools, and whether we know how to talk about it. And so what I'm going to say to you is the reason we want to pay attention to these things is we want them to shape our results and performance on purpose. So the sooner you learn about this and you start to understand it and really take control of it and the way you think about it, the more you'll get the outcomes you actually want versus something that might just be happening. Compensation is what we pay ourselves and people. Every business that stays in business has this, right? Because most of the time, unless it's volunteer, people are working for something. And compensation matters, of course, because, well, usually in a business, their labor costs or their people is one of their biggest expenses. So unless you have buildings where you put people in, like real estate, compensation is often one of our biggest costs. So we want to think about that because that's definitely going to shape our results and our performance. We also have to know about our competition and the context of our business, like how many other people are doing what we're doing. How many other businesses out there are actually good at it? And how many people out there are doing it, but they're actually not that good at it, right? So you should know your competition and the context. You should think about the way you structure your business, right? Like how many people do you really need? Versus how many people do you leverage, right? You have the right people in the right roles so that you can get that performance that you want. You've also got to take and look how like low this is. And I know for some people, they say to me, why is this so low on the list? And I say, well, vision and purpose and strategy, it exists during the process. And many people don't know how to integrate it into their business. They think it's a document. They think that this is like a strategic plan or something they write down and they keep it in their pocket or it's on their device. but they don't integrate it into their leadership practices. And today I'd like to just encourage you that this vision and your purpose and strategy should be in here in this like most important things, so that it is integrated, that you're communicated on a regular basis, and frankly, that you're checking in with it to make sure you're on track versus keeping it in your head and then finding out later that things aren't. I'm going to talk to you about how to do that in a minute in this manifestation category. And then of course, look, you have people and practices, which is actually how your business runs. So this whole category here is super important for you to think about. You could even use it as a checklist if you needed to. I want to talk about manifestation. I know anybody who pays attention to law of attraction or out on the internet, people talk about this word. You've probably seen it before. In business, what it really means is when you take ideas and intentions, specifically over here in your leadership thinking in your shapers category, and you pull them into real life. Like you do something with it. And so a lot of times, all of this leadership thinking and philosophy and practice starts to take place. This is our culture of our business, right? In our values. That means what's important to us, and that's how we make decisions. And by the way, the other side of values is also deciding what's not important and not spending money on it and not doing something. So I want you to, I hope you have more than a shallow understanding of the word values, because I always say to leaders, values aren't just aspirational, like we want to have quality or I want to have a big business that does this. It's also you saying no to the things that you don't need and will be in the way of your vision and your purpose. You also have beliefs and a climate or the environment of the business. Like, how does it feel? Does it feel friendly? Does it feel fun for people to work there? Do they feel valued, right? This is a part of that culture. You have norms, like this is how we do it here. And by the way, sometimes there's people who we hire and they want to do things differently than the way you've normed or set policy. And then of course, your business has symbols, your logo. Maybe you have other symbols in your store or your online environment that have to do with people understanding what your brand is, right? That your brand comes forth from your vision and how you want it to look and feel, so people know it's you. And so when they come back, they have an experience that's consistent. That's what our norms and our symbols and our philosophies do. And through that, of course, we start actually impacting people. And I said it earlier, how do we do that? Well, we do it through behavior. We talk to our employees and we talk to our customers, whether that's digital or physically with each other. People are having an experience of us. And I call that the impact, because that's actually the tangible experience of you and the business. So whether it's a big company like Starbucks or McDonald's or these global brands, which I'm sure you all know they exist and you might have experienced them, they work very, very hard so that every interaction with their employees is a consistent experience of their philosophy and their practices through their beliefs and their norms and their symbols, right? They make sure every Starbucks cup has a logo on it. And they want every interaction with a store employee for them to do and say the right things and make the right decisions so that our customers have a consistent experience. They get the results they want. We get the results we want, right? They come, they get their drink, we get their money. Every business is this system. So I'm hopefully today empowering you with some thinking about it. And like I said, after this, if you run a small business or you work for a big company, you could literally print this out and make it a checklist and just start to think about, how are we doing this? What are we doing? How is it pulling through? How is it coming out in our performance and results? What outcomes are we experiencing? And are we getting what we want? And if we're not getting what we want, what do we have to go and address so that we can get what we want as quickly as we can. I'm going to give you more. There's a lot here. Get ready. Okay, so now I'm going to share with you something called the growth curve. And the growth curve was developed by a man who has recently passed away, and he was super smart. So young leaders, you will appreciate this. Dr. George Land, who has passed, went to Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It's called MIT. It's here in the US. It's a very distinguished university for really smart people. He went when he was 16. That is earlier than most US teens go to university. So he went early, about 2 years earlier than others might go to college, because he was so smart. And the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, really specializes in the sciences, right? Technology, engineering, the sciences. So he was really good at math and science. And he wrote eventually his dissertation, which is a research project that you do if you're getting your PhD. He did it on what were the unifying principles of all the sciences. Like, who does that, right? I remember the first time I met him and I'm like, what kid thinks of this? So I think he was on this earth to do some really awesome work. And so I'm excited to give this to you. He wrote a book about 40 years ago that was up for a Pulitzer Prize, which is a global award for new thinking and beautiful thinking and writing that people can use. The book was called Grow or Die. And so I'm just going to teach you a little piece of this, because I think it's super important that you understand leadership in the context of an organization and where it is in its growth curve. So that's what I'm going to show you. So Dr. Land figured out for us that there's two things that matter the most when you're thinking about growth. The growth of any business, for profit, nonprofit, it doesn't matter, right? Any organization, any organism, when we're thinking about growth, we need to understand that if you're going to grow and not die, right? His book was called Grow or Die. That means you're going to live over time. That means your business is going to stay alive and grow over time, of course, right? It also means, he said, that for your business to grow over time, you will continually have more complex connections in your business, specifically with your employees, your customers, your vendors, everybody who you interact with as you grow, because growth often has something called scale, right? More people, more customers, more products, more services, technology tending to push us to move faster because we're actually closer to our customers using technology than we ever were before. People, if you are selling something online, I sell stuff online. I know some of you do too. When you're using technology, all of a sudden, the old problem stores would have when you physically had to go there, drive there and go and buy something, that meant there was a gap in the amount of time of your customer wanting something from you and getting it from you. Now, because of the internet, we have closed that gap. And so our customers, like I said, are closer to us. They can get our products from us if we use the internet well, faster. I was online shopping, like you probably all do too, on my phone in the middle of the night. I'm sure all of you are aware of a company called Amazon. It's our customer. Amazon is a great example. I think Flipkart, I don't know if you have Flipkart there, but in India, it's like the equivalent of Amazon. You can buy anything 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as you all know. And so, of course, what has happened is time is actually like condensed. We actually have closer connections with each other. And so what he predicted a long time ago was that would become more complicated because we would be forced to deal with problems faster. And the bigger you got, of course, those problems would be bigger in scale potentially. So I want to teach you about this because there's a lot of implications to leaders at every stage of growth as a company goes forward. There you go. So the first phase, I'm going to teach you about 3 phases of growth. The first phase is called formative. So I know it is very common that we use the word entrepreneurial. You've probably heard that word because that's what people usually call startup businesses or small businesses. And Dr. Land said that here are the characteristics of a business that is in the formative stage. Now, I want you to understand that Dr. Land said you can only stay there for so long. So you either make it through that phase and into the next one, which I'll show you in a few minutes, or you probably die. And a lot of small businesses, that's what happens, right? They stay in, they can't get themselves out of this phase. They just take too long and they don't prove themselves. And I'll talk to you about something here that's really important. So I mentioned here are the characteristics of this. It's entrepreneurial, right? It means that we are fresh and we're starting something. It usually is fairly chaotic. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that it's creative, right? Like we're trying to maybe do something new. A lot of small formative businesses are trying to be different, right? Like we want to do something other people aren't doing. We want to sell something other people aren't selling or in the same way. And so it tends to be a little chaotic and creative because this one is a really important one for you to think about. You're searching for a pattern. So in that early stage, so if you've never heard this before, it's super important. In the early stages of a business, specifically when you're doing something new, is that you're searching for a pattern, right? Like you're searching for the new way to interact with the customers and get them to keep coming back and paying money. And because we're searching for a pattern a lot of times down here in the formative stage, the leaders are then saying, okay, well, they have to what's called bootstrap, right? Like you have to maybe use your own money, or you have to like use credit cards, or you have to do whatever you do to finance the business while you're searching for the pattern, while you're searching for the magic to get the customers to keep coming back and buy your stuff, right? So we call it trial and error. And that means I'm going to try a new marketing idea. I'm going to try a new policy. I'm going to try a new practice. I'm going to think about a new kind of employee. That's trial and error. And maybe some of them work and some of them don't work. That's part of this kind of chaos in small business, is that you try stuff. Some of it works, some of it doesn't work. And hopefully you're quick to figure it out. It can be exciting and scary. It's a little bit of survival, right? Believe me, in the first 5 years of my business, there was a lot of survival because sometimes we spent a lot of time trying to get big companies to hire us to do consulting or training or something. And we spent months trying to sell it to the customer. And sometimes I had to fly across the United States to New York or somewhere to try and pitch it against another firm. And sometimes we got it and sometimes we didn't. And some of our employees, they would tell you, I have a great story about survival orientation. I won't waste all your time, but I'll tell you that there were some deals that we tried to go against big firms, and I spent like $10,000 US trying to get the customer because it was such a big account, and then we didn't get it. And all of a sudden we were back in survival mode because we spent a lot of money trying to do something. And so this happens a lot in formative. Everybody has their own version of that idea, but I want you to know that it's important. And the last thing is also important, because remember what I said about relationships, right? Our businesses are driven by relationships. So even if you never meet your customers in person, you are dependent on them to come to your digital business or your physical business and buy something in some way. And so we are in the beginning, In the formative time, we are highly customer dependent. They're usually the stakeholder who's going to tell us whether our pattern is working or not. And they're going to tell us with their money. They're either going to buy from you or they're not. And that's feedback from a stakeholder that's getting you the outcomes you want or not. So Dr. Land said, remember we went back to grow or die. His estimation, and I think he's right, if we were to look at in most countries at startup businesses, most either make it within 3 to 5 years or they don't. And that's usually because the people starting the businesses oftentimes run out of money if their customers don't start paying for the business and being profitable fairly quickly. So it validates our pattern. It validates the product or service that we think is the right one and the process we have to use to bring the leads and the customers into a place where they buy on a regular basis. Now, let's assume that happens and you prove the pattern and your customers give you the feedback that this is going to work. Now we cross the line into what's called normative. And it's called normative because we're not forming anymore. We're norming, we're becoming normal, we're stabilizing. And normative for a business, so you as leaders really think about this because this is where things start to get complicated. So let me show you this. Phase 2 in growth is where we start to norm. Think about what happens here. We've proven it to ourselves that we can do this. We've proven because we have customers now and we probably have some employees, but we've got customers who are coming back. They're waiting for our brand. They're waiting for the business to be the thing that they expect it to be. And so what happens, leaders? We have to get more organized. And the reason we have to get more organized is, like I was saying, well, because now it's a little bit more complicated than it was before. And we got to do it fast because we don't want to disappoint all those customers who keep coming back to us. So usually what happens is we get organized, we develop some systems. We start to say to ourselves, okay, I now know what marketing has to feel like to get us the kind of leads of new customers, to get someone to buy something, to become a member, to become our customer officially. And now I got to get those systems in place so we can provide the service they're expecting at the quality level that I, the leader, want, right? So we're not experimenting anymore. We can't be as creative and chaotic oftentimes as we were when we started because we now have to have a stable, normalized experience for those customers. And so what do? Well, we start hopefully hiring some people to help us. And now we have a new set of problems because we've got to get those employees, those new people, to do what we need them to do consistently so that the customer has the experience that they're wanting. So this becomes, like I said, the normative or normalizing, stabilizing phase. We get organized, we hire people. So we have an emerging hierarchy usually in the way we hire people. We build some what we call early walls, and that happens as soon as you start to hire people, by the way, you guys. It is not a bad thing, but it can turn into a bad thing, and we'll talk about that because we go, oh, I need somebody for social. I'm going to hire a social media person to run my Twitter and my Instagram. I have this, by the way, I have this, and I'll tell you why it's a problem for us. You hire people to help you with certain things, and it takes a lot of effort from your leaders to make sure everybody's on the same program, right? So that what are we doing? Leadership practices, driving culture, driving relationships, getting outcomes. So as soon as you start hiring people, you have to make sure that we don't build walls in between them so that my social media person's not talking to the person over here. And all of a sudden they're not delivering the same messages to our customers. We have to stay super connected. Now, even more, by the way, this phase of growth is important because remember I said you have to say no sometimes? Well, you have to start choosing what you're going to do, and then you have to choose what you're not going to do, which sometimes feels bad, by the way, to those of you who are entrepreneurial. I know that when I first started my business, in the early stage of the business, to be honest with you, like I was saying, my first 5 years, I just wanted to prove that I could have the business. So I took a lot of customers and said yes, that we could do a lot of things that we probably shouldn't have. And sometimes we do that in the beginning. And then you get a little bit more mature as a business and you have to choose where you use your resources. And you have to choose what you're not going to do, because remember, one of the primary things you as a leader are trying to do here is provide a consistent experience for your customers. So if you try too many new things, you are at risk at confusing your customers. Your brand will not look and feel the same. And so you'll have a problem, right? Your customers will show up and go, wait, stop. What happened? That's not what I was buying before. They don't look the same as they did before. What happened? It happens when people redo their websites all the time, by the way, right? People show up and you go, whoa, what just happened? Now, the good news about this phase is that if you do well, you will start believing you're real. You'll know that your dream's coming true, which is great. Now, I want to show you what happens when companies start to get big. And that can mean a lot of things. But to me, it usually means, and you might laugh at me, but what I have found is this next phase is kind of like when you get to a milestone of a company that has 100 employees or more, you start to potentially have some phase 2 behaviors. Now, let me show you what happens to normative. This is called late stage normative. And in late stage normative, I'm telling you, my dog's barking in her sleep. It's amazing. Okay, late stage normative, this is super important. So you've had success. Now this can be 100 employees to 100,000 employees. It doesn't matter, but once you're normed, right? We believe this is who we are. We're now selling in the marketplace on a regular basis, right? We've stabilized to the point where we are consistently providing some product or experience to our customers. New customers, existing customers, even past customers, if we're really good at reaching out to that group. So we have an established success pattern. That's what that's called. And this can be a problem, so I want you to pay attention to it. Most leaders want to get to the point where their business is highly predictable. I want to know that when I spend so much to promote a campaign for marketing, it's going to bring this many people to the website. And of those people, this many people is going to put something in their cart and this many people are going to buy it. That's what I call highly predictable, right? And we're all trying to get it. And out there in the world, I'm sure you've experienced, there's a lot of people who are selling services to help everybody do that. I'm going to help you get this many people to come to your website or this many people to come to your store, and then they're going to buy it and they're going to do this, right? So we're all looking for predictability. Now, there's some problems that come with that, and I'm going to talk about it in a minute because you as leaders should be paying attention. The other thing you should look for at this phase of the game is you start to hire people. And I will tell you guys, there's a little bit of a trap here. And if you are starting your own business, you might have this, which is you hire people and they come to work for you. And so instead of serving the system, they are often serving the boss. They want to make you happy, which sometimes is great, but it doesn't always work. So I want you to pay attention to that. When you hire people and they came to work for you, you have to make sure that they understand in the system what behaviors they should be using and what relationships they should have with your customer and your business that are the right ones for the business, not just what they think is going to make you happy on any day. The reason why this can become a problem if it's not obvious is because sometimes leaders lose their way. I wouldn't have a job if some leaders didn't need coaching. And sometimes our businesses grow to a point where we as a leader can't lead the way we did when we started, or even when we started our job. And as the business continues to grow, remember I was talking to you about complexity and connections. Well, this starts to become a problem if the boss is not as good at the business as they were before because the business has outgrown them. So if everybody starts pleasing the boss and the boss isn't actually making good decisions, we have problems. And this happens in companies of all sizes. Like I said, it's why I have a coaching job, because I help leaders see that the people are saying yes to you, and you might be wrong. Happens all the time, you guys. Happens a lot of times in big companies because the systems are trying to make everything so predictable. And sometimes the bosses aren't paying attention to the data, or they don't like it, or they want it their way, and they think they're right, and they believe they're the smartest people in the room. And maybe they are, but it doesn't mean that they're necessarily in the system anymore. It's a really common leadership problem. The other thing that happens in the larger you get is it can become what's called bureaucratic. We can have too many rules, too many systems, because when we're trying to be predictable, we put in systems. We buy systems, we make policies, we make procedures. The more employees you have, the more we try to control the process and make the brand consistent. Well, that can have a bad side to it. It can feel like, oh, like too much, right? Too much process. So you have to pay attention to that. The other thing that can happen is that we can drift away from our original thoughts about who we wanted to be, why we did the business in the first place. And so that's called organizational drift. And we want to be careful, because the more people, like I said, the more people you hire, the more people who are out there interacting with your customer. And that means they are the experience. Their relationship with your customer is the experience of the business. And so if we drift away from what we originally started out to do, this can be a problem, of course. So you want to pay attention to that. Also, of course, you may have heard this, sometimes we have boundaries in the business, and those become a problem. It becomes a problem when our employees or the teams in our business start competing with each other. So instead of us paying attention to competition outside of our business, what happens in really big companies oftentimes is they spend a lot of time and energy in meetings fighting with each other over resources, people resources, money resources, timing, right? That they're not necessarily working together like this. They're kind of fighting against each other. And by the way, what usually happens in those big companies when that happens is someone from the outside, some competition, some new business easily starts to take their customers away. Because they're too busy fighting with each other. So you want to be careful of that. And the last one, nobody wants to be or admit that they are arrogant or complacent. And I want you to be careful, because what I see in a lot of young businesses right now, specifically people who are leveraging technology and Instagram, et cetera, is that anybody who gets early successes in there can easily start to believe that they have a success pattern that's going to last a long time, and they become a little arrogant and complacent. And I want you to watch that, because it's definitely here in the US, we've seen a lot of issues in our high-tech companies where our young leaders have success really soon. And so they start to forget that they have to work hard, and they start to get a little arrogant and believe in themselves. And then oftentimes what will happen is some of these other problems will whack them on the head. And so we have then what's called the wall. And any of those things I just talked to you about, if you're not paying attention to them, could potentially hurt your business. And sometimes you can hit a wall, like run into something that you didn't see coming. And like I was saying to you, if your organization becomes big enough and your team starts fighting with each other, I promise you sooner or later, you are going to hit into a wall, because they won't be paying attention to what's happening outside your business with your customers and competition. And so you should pay attention, because there are signs. And again, this is why my team and I have a job, because oftentimes customers call us, big companies call us, when they start to have these symptoms. Old ways of working don't work anymore. It meant all those systems they put in place to be predictable are not working anymore. They've got internal competition and external competition, and they don't know what to do about it. Their profits are down, their market share is down. right? So all of a sudden, they used to be the #1 company in that segment, that area, selling that product, and all of a sudden they're not anymore. Their customers are mad. Their employees are mad. Satisfaction is down. Disgruntled. Morale is bad. Customers aren't coming back. Employees are mad. And we have what I call culture shock. So earlier I was saying you could have cultural drift, and cultural drift can turn into culture shock, where all of a sudden you wake up one day as a leader, and I hope this never happens to you, and you go, oh my gosh, what happened to my business? This isn't the place I built. This isn't what I wanted to happen. How did this happen? And then, my friends, we have what is potentially a set of bigger problems, because leaders who panic and use what I call back to basics strategies oftentimes kill their own businesses. There's the death spiral. I didn't make that up, by the way. Unintentionally, because they wait too long to address those symptoms. Now, again, that's why I have a job. Part of my job, if people call me soon enough, I always like them to call me down here, by the way. But if they call us and they're in this kind of red zone, or they've already started to decline, all of a sudden we've got to do some work. So that's like the kind of coaching where we spend a lot of time going, okay, everybody stop panicking. Let's look at what's really happening. Let's look at where in the system of leadership practices, culture, relationships, and outcomes, where do we have the biggest problems? What are your stakeholders telling you, right? What are your employees saying? What are your customers saying? And how do we get on the right track? And here's what's super important for you to learn today. The right track isn't going backwards, because we can't go back to entrepreneurial. Not in this same business we're talking about. Can't go back in time. And you can't necessarily go back into normative and try to do those things better or the same. You've got to go forward. And I'm going to show you something. And it's really important. It's important that you grow a business, whether you're working for someone else or yourself, and you start to see that the best way to run a business is to what's called bifurcate. And bifurcation means we create new beginnings in our business, new product lines, new services, new way of thinking before we hit any walls. So I want to show you this. It's my favorite thing. So you never go in the death spiral, by the way. I'm going to come back to this, but this is my favorite slide. Your business, if you want sustainable, healthy growth as a leader, you've got to build a business that does what this slide illustrates, right? We're running our business in normative, but before it becomes a problem, and before we have decline in satisfaction from our customers and our employees, before the competition eats our lunch and takes things away from us, before the death spiral, we have to think about the next thing. We've got to be innovative. We've got to build a way down here so that we can bifurcate and think about the next version of our business before someone else does. And if you build that thinking into your business early enough, you'll just do that over and over again, over and over again. And that's what's sustainable. And that's what's healthy, where your company never hits the walls and never goes into a death spiral. You're always reinventing yourselves before the external factors tell us to do that. So from a leadership perspective, you've got to do a few things. Now, there's stuff on this list that I will tell you, some of these words really annoy me because people have written books about them. And some of those books I think are too shallow. Like they describe these items and they don't do a nice job, I don't think always, of helping you understand exactly what it means from a leadership perspective. So I wanted to bring it to you today. First of all, empowering your people is the #1 thing you have to put in your system. Your leadership practices have to empower people. And empowering people means that your employees have to know how to make the right decisions in any moment in time. Hopefully without having to ask you, without hesitation, that they can solve problems for your customer, they can solve problems for themselves and their coworkers as quickly as possible in a way that lives the values and vision for your business that you've set forth, without a lot of policies to make them do that, without a lot of time for them to have to ask a boss 3 levels above them. See, that's one of the problems in big normative companies, specifically big public companies or enterprises that work globally, is that they get so big that they oftentimes build so much structure to drive the enormity of it and the scale of it, that they take away the empowerment of people. And we want to make sure that your people are empowered so that they can make the right decisions, they can avoid problems, and they don't get stuck waiting for a boss or you to solve the problem for them and the customer, when the customer then leaves and goes and buys something from someone else. So we want to empower people. You want to use your values, your vision, your purpose as boundaries all the time. Build it into decision making. You want a trusting culture, and I mean for real, not fake, not nice to have, but you be a trustworthy person and only hire and keep people who you trust, they trust you. And then there's that reciprocity in the relationship. Don't hire shady people. Don't be shady. Don't do it. It's really difficult, I think, in real life sometimes, but I just want to say to you is this is super important, right? To build a trusting culture, you can't do it fake. And you can't wait till you get big enough and you hire human resources and that's their job. I always think that's a little silly, by the way. And I've said that to many, many chief people officers of very, very large global companies, where I'm like, you know what, if a company's going to get to the point where it's HR's job to drive trust, it's a problem. It's a problem. I won't spend all today. We can talk about that another day. You've got to build a corporation or a company that's change ready, right? Everybody's got to know, what are we trying to do? We're trying to do that. That means we got to be able to change. We have to be able to actually react to the marketplace quickly, not wait until we hit into a wall and have a problem. You've got to serve those customers like we were talking about. Like I've said it, I know that you guys know it. We're closer to our customers than they've ever been. We've got to create a space where our people can be interdependent, where they can work with each other cleanly without a lot of problems. We have to create a place where people can be creative and innovative, which sometimes if you're a boss, you know that's difficult because you want to be in control of outcomes. So it's hard sometimes to let people be creative when you're trying to control the experience. That takes some balance. You've got to risk taking new ideas. You've got to be okay with risking. You know, you got to be okay with some level of risk in your business, and you have to let people make mistakes. And that is very difficult to do sometimes. So this is, you know, really to me, a roadmap for a kind of culture that starts with your leadership practices, which is why I started there today. In you thinking about your beliefs and values as a leader is driving a shadow. For you to do it on purpose, you've got to know the outcomes you want, and you've got to know the kind of culture you need in your relationships to take care of this so that you create a sustainable, healthy business. Now, like I was saying to you, and I'm going to pause so we can have time for questions. And maybe I'll just, I'll take the slides off. We don't need them for Q&A, but if somebody wants me to come back to a certain slide, I can. Yeah, so Ignatius, why don't we open up? Does anybody have any questions?
All right. Great.
I didn't hear you.
So we have a few questions. Yes. I'll start with the first one. It says, you spoke about a leader and a manager.
So I think Ignatius's network. Ignatius.
If there's any difference between the two people, a difference between the leader and the manager.
I think I know what
He
you're.
wants to know if there's any difference between the
Yes,
two.
I think his network is quite bad. Let me come in.
Yeah, Rachel, you come in. How do I hear him?
Okay,
I
let me
go?
read it.
Should I go ahead with the rest of
I actually lost all the chats. Oh my God.
Okay, I have it, Rachel. So thank you for that. No worries. You guys, in this world of technology, isn't it amazing?
But I have the chance. If you could permit me to come in, I have the chance.
Okay, no problem. You can read it.
The first question was that my question is pertaining to Amazon. How does a brand stand out on Amazon? Any strategies you know? That's the question.
I'll tell you, I think that a critical strategy if you're going to do business on Amazon is to ensure that you're very clear about the differentiation of your product, and then ensure that your marketing is well done. I know that they have some partners to help drive that. I don't know all the names of those businesses, but I'll tell you, I do know that getting your search words and ensuring that you're clear on how to describe your product compared to the other products is super important, so that it comes up high on the search for sure.
Okay. The second question, mine is pertaining to Amazon. I have a little business and I want to get my product on Amazon. How should I go about it? That's the second question.
Yeah. You guys, I think that if you just go on to Amazon, they have a whole section for people who want to put products, everything from ebooks to physical products, and they have the directions that you can download and decide what kind of relationship that you have with them. So it's right on their main site. I don't know if you can get to all of it through the mobile site, so you may have to actually do some of it on a laptop computer, but they have an incredible amount of resources and it's really easy to do. The harder thing is what the first question the person asked, right? Is how to
Yes.
get higher on the search. Getting into Amazon is easy.
Yeah.
Getting higher on the search
Okay.
products is the hard part.
Okay. Now, the other question, in your 5-year period of growing your business, did you at any point in time feel like quitting? What triggered this? How did you overcome the quitting thoughts in your mind? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such a great question. So absolutely, in the beginning, I felt like quitting a few times. I think the things that triggered the most of those moments for me were, well, failure getting jobs, right? It takes a lot of time and energy to win consulting jobs. And so some of that for me was difficult. I'll also tell you that the other thing that probably has continually in 25 years, the things that make me want to quit still today, I'm not going to quit, obviously. But this business is hard. Leaders will hire us to help with problems. And it is not uncommon that when we get there, they don't do what we tell them. Right. So they hire consultants and coaches, and they don't want to make the hard decisions to fix the real problems, specifically leaders who the problems have a lot to do with their behavior. So those are the moments sometimes for me where I go, why am I doing this? Because I can spend a lot of time and effort and energy trying to help people solve problems that seem like they're obvious, and their employees are telling them and their customers are telling them, like everybody's telling them what the problem is. And sometimes they won't do what they have to do to fix it. And that's like for me, stab in the heart. So I try not to take it too personally, but I think that's the answer.
Okay, thank you. The next one. How do I stand out as an upcoming young coach?
That's a really great thing. Standing out as a coach takes some energy. I would say get certified. I'm sorry, my dog again is taking control of things. Hey, anybody who wants to be a coach at this moment, first of all, the coach means a lot of things now. So you should get super clear on what kind of coaching you want to do. Business coaching is very different than life coaching. The internet seems to be full of people calling themselves coaches. So I would be careful of that because standing out is difficult in a sea of people who are wearing the label, if you will. But I would say to you that one of the ways I think to start out as a coach is get certified in something so that you have a program or an assessment tool or something that you start to build your toolkit. Because coaching means, like I said, you deal with people and people have problems, and people's problems sometimes can be very overwhelming until you have like a program or a way that you know that you can consistently and predictably help them with the problem. So a toolkit would be very, 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 very good. And there are some really great ones on the internet that you can have access to, coaching programs at all different low cost, high cost. I don't know all what you all have access to, but I will tell you, you can easily find some coaching certifications that are great. And I would encourage you to do that.
Okay. The next one. Can we all, oh, sorry, this one was question of audible. I skipped one question and I'm going back to it. The speaker talked about a leader and a manager. Is there any difference between the two people? Thanks.
It's a great question. So first of all, sometimes it can be two different people. I would say each one of you need to be good at both, right? Leading is a little different than managing, right? Managing people and managing process tends to be a day-to-day job that has a lot of attention to process and detail and how those relationships with your customer are being managed, how your product is being packaged or delivered, all of the details on the execution of the business. That's what managers do. Leaders are often also managers, depending on the company, depending on the business. And so some people have to do both. What I usually see in big companies is that at a certain point in time, when people become a vice president or higher, they can manage less of the day-to-day business, and they start to have the privilege of leading by thinking longer term, by planning more, by thinking about that. Remember, I said the bifurcation of what's next for us, innovating and creating partnerships versus delivering on our core business every day. I think in smaller businesses, we end up having to do both until we get big enough that we can hire people to manage. Hopefully that's clear.
Okay, so I think the questions are done, right? Abdul.
Yes.
I think so.
Okay, so any more questions? Please, if you have any question, kindly go ahead and drop it so Christine answers it. So any more questions? Okay, if there are no questions, I think the network just kicked Ignatius off.
So
Ignatius,
I have some questions.
Okay.
Yes, great. So I have some questions with regards to pivoting. Is it right to pivot at the vertical stage as a business? And
I can't hear him. Ignatius, we lost you, and I want to hear your question.
it's right. Do you shift completely from your product, from what you already into a different sector? Please, did you get my question?
No, we got part. I only got part of your Jen.
Hello? Yes. So I was saying, is it right to completely do pivoting at the biophysical stage and forego some of the product line, thereby bringing new products into the market? For example, the case of Kodak, which was at a point dominating the entire market. And so for Kodak, would it have been right for them to bring a new product instead of sticking to?
A great question. I'm sorry that we can't hear you. Ignatius, I think I know what you're asking. And everybody, this is a great case study, actually, Kodak. Yeah.
Going obsolete.
Yeah, I'm going to try and answer you. We didn't get all of your question, but I think I know what you're asking.
Please, do you get my?
Nope, I think we lost you. Yeah, so let me try and answer the question. So everybody, if you don't know what he's saying, Kodak is a great case study because that is a company that definitely stayed in their normative leadership and behavior for too long. They talk about not only being arrogant, but their leaders did not see the death spiral coming fast enough. They held on to their old product lines for a very long time, even though they were getting clear indicators from the marketplace that other competition was happening. And you know, just a few of the things that were happening was Kodak didn't move to digital fast enough. And some of that is, if we look at the model I showed all of you, leadership practices drive our culture, drive our relationships, drive our outcomes, right? Many big companies get really good at building their core legacy products in ways that their core legacy business is there. And they miss the indicators from the marketplace, but they also miss something super important, which I think, Ignatius, is the real answer to your question, which is, I don't know that Kodak could have pivoted fast enough because they didn't have the talent they needed inside the company to completely move as fast as they needed to because they waited too long. And all of you, if you're looking for some great books with these examples, if you're interested in this, there are, there's a book by Jim Collins called, I'm putting it in the chat, How the Mighty Fall, which is potentially by, I'm putting it here for you. There's a book recommendation there, How the Mighty Fall. Everybody, if you're interested, you could download it. And it tells some stories of some companies like Kodak who stayed in that late stage normative for way too long. They didn't bifurcate. Their leaders underestimated what the change in technology was going to do. That's happened with automobile companies. It's happened with food companies. There are lots of businesses from many industries where the leaders, so I'm just teaching you, I mean, I know we have to go in a few minutes, but I want to leave you with the thinking, because your leadership practices and the way you as a leader think can be make or break to the business at a certain point in time if you're not thinking about the need to bifurcate before the marketplace forces you to do it. And if you wait too long, Kodak is a great example, but there's a lot of examples. I would encourage all of you, depending on the kinds of businesses that you're in, to really pay attention to the giants who have gone before you if they exist. And I know for many of you who are trying to do business digitally, I know that that's still fairly new, but there's enough that you can start to see the companies that have actually innovated and changed themselves quickly, and the ones that did not or are not currently. And because there's easy barrier to entry now for people to start businesses, there'll be more and more small businesses that take over the big ones, I promise. And I think it's going to be some of you. So I don't know, Rachel, Ignatius, if you have anything else to say. I know we're getting to time, and this has been wonderful.
Okay, thank you so much. Ignatius is, okay, I really think his network is not favoring him today.
I think so
So
too.
thank you all so much. Any more questions? No, we'll round up shortly. So I'm going to launch a poll. Please do fill the poll, okay, excluding the speaker. So I'm launching it right now, then you do fill it right away. So whilst we are filling the poll, I'll take some more questions. So do well to fill the poll. It's on your screen. So do well to fill it. Okay, so there's a question here. How does Michael Porter's competitive forces helped you, if any, in strategizing your business?
Yeah, it's great. Look, Michael Porter, that's a classic. I would say to all of you, if you don't have it in your toolkit, Michael Porter's 5 Forces, you should definitely learn how to use that. It's not a difficult tool when you start to actually use that to think about the competitive landscape, how you want to position yourself. You also should learn how to do a SWOT analysis on a regular basis. And if you have employees or you work with other people, teach them that immediately. There's even apps to do that for free. So yeah, I would say Michael Porter and SWOT. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's a really great starter tool that you should all have. Maybe Rachel, I'll think about that and we can do another one of these because we can look.
Pestle.
Pestle, yeah, great idea. Pestle, environmental scan. Yeah, Ignatius, that's a great idea. That definitely goes in that category of some basics that everybody should know. If you guys haven't, I didn't see on YouTube, Rachel, if you guys had done that with people, but that would be a really great exercise for people to see some of these tools.
Okay, sure. So, so do fill in the poll on your screen. And if you have any last question, kindly do all to drop it.
Okay, I have a final question. I'm really enjoying everything, and it relates to me. Please, in the entrepreneurial stage, is it right to envision the formative stage and put down the principles, the culture, and everything, so that when you get to the normative stage, it's going to be more like flexible? Is it right to bring in some flexibility in the formative stage, heading towards the normative stage?
Yeah, for sure. Look, Ignatius, for everybody here, not just you, but everybody, your awareness of all the stages will help you ensure that you move from stage to stage in a smoother, more integrated way, right? So it's one of the reasons I'm doing that with all of you, because I think sometimes when I just give it to you and now you know it exists, you will be better already at thinking about what stage am I in, and where should I be, and what should I be using, what could I be using, and then you can let your let the business tell you what it needs, right? And just make sure you just don't stay informative for too long, because if you try to stay too creative and too unstructured for too long, then you'll miss with the customers. You won't be consistent enough. So I hope that
Thank you
helps
very much. Thank you very much. So we would, ladies and gentlemen, if there's any question, you kindly drop it. Else we would drop our speakers' social media handles where you could follow her and learn.
Great.
Okay, so whilst Ignatius is
Rachel.
Yes, Ignatius. Yes, so Ignatius, if your network is good, you can go ahead and talk about the shout out, what we've introduced. Then I will drop in Christine's handles, social media handles on the chat session, so that anyone who is interested can go and follow her.
Okay, sure. That's great. So we introduced something into our sessions, which is shout out for businesses, and it's basically where we mention the access to sharing our artworks to the general public on social media and getting to repost it. And for this week, it's Jojo Bonnet. She's into the production of Jojo. Sorry, she's into the production of hair bonnets, and I'll also drop her Instagram handle for everyone to. So if you're getting a bonnet, kindly, I'll drop the handle shortly. Yes. Richard, are you done dropping Christian's handle so that I drop
Yes,
our, yes. So
yes, I
I'm
have.
dropping the handle for the winner for this week, Jojo Bonnet. She's into the design and production of African made bonnets and beautiful bonnets. You can check out her page on Instagram. I've dropped it here. Just check it out and you will enjoy a lot of things from her. She has discount packages for businesses and individuals. So if you are a fan of bonnets, just visit her page and you get one for yourself. Great. So in the absence of any further questions, I'll invite Rachel to give the vote of thanks, after which I'll give my final words, and then the Christine would also share her final words with us. So Rachel, over to you now.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Christine, for this amazing session. This was such some serious great insights that I've really learned a lot. I've really written things down, and I'm going to implement most of the things that you've talked about. Most of these things that you talked about, we wouldn't have gotten it in our educational books, but then you've given great insights into it that we wouldn't have seen anywhere. So we appreciate you today, and we thank you so much for even wanting to be part of this. It means a lot to me, it means a lot to the organization, and it means a lot to everyone who joined. Thank you so much, and we hope to have you again sometime.
Yep, I loved it. So anytime. I'm thrilled for all of you. Don't let anybody pour cold water on your dreams. Do it, do it, do it.
Amazing, amazing. I'm going to record today in my diary, and one day I'll share with the world how Christian Grimm shared amazing insights that transformed my business and my perspective with regards to growing the leadership curve in the business. I'm really grateful, and on behalf of GYLCD, we say thank you. So please, if you have any final words for us, we are ready for you, Christine.
Yeah, my final words is just you are all awesome, and you can do it. You can do it, whatever you're going to do. I can't wait till you're famous, Ignatius. Like, for real, I'm going to be sitting there going, I did know him. I was one of the people who told him what to do. So you got this.
Thank you very much, Christine. And it was amazing having you. Ladies and gentlemen, I told you from the beginning that our speaker was loaded with lots of insight, and you can testify for yourself that she has really blown our minds. And seriously, I had my diary here, and I was jotting down every bit of what she shared. It's an amazing privilege, and CB is in the business of developing, passionate about driving change in their communities. And seminars and sessions like this help us become better. So thank you all once again. And it's been great having you. My name is Ignatius. I will take your host.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you. Ignatius, what your network really wants to. Thank you all. Thank you all so much for joining me. Thank you, Christine, once again. We do have our last session next week. Then we go on a break till January. Yes, till January, in the middle of January. Yes, so we'll communicate everything on the platform. So if you're not on the platform,
next
kindly
week,
join in.
same time, same platform, and do all to be the best in whatever you do. Practice what has been shared here. Be a doer. Act on it. And
okay, so so yes, so if you're not on the platform, do well to join in through the link I sent, and we catch you same time next week. Thank you so much, Christine, and thank you everyone for joining.
All right, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.